Would you say and spell your name and, fact that you're a candidate for mayor?
My name is Brian Frank. I'm a candidate for mayor of Cincinnati.
BRIANFRANK, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Just tell me a little bit about yourself. The post you said on the website said you're 66. You worked at P&G. You were in the military. Any other highlights you wanna bring out?
I also worked for Dr. Odell Owens at Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. He had me working on a number of special projects. One of the ones that's closest to home is I was a key member of the Clifton Market Co-op. I was a board member and played an active role in getting funding from the city of Cincinnati, and then restarting that co-op and making it no longer a food desert in the Clifton Gaslight District.
This is your first official run for any office.
Oh,
correct?
yes. I've never run for a public office before.
Well, why the mayor? Why did you decide to run for mayor of Cincinnati?
Well, I was concerned that there might not be another candidate on the ballot opposing the current mayor, Aftab Purvo, and I felt that it was my patriotic duty to ensure that we had an option for voters to consider at least one other candidate for office other than just having the mayor get a pass on having to run for re-election.
If you're elected, what would be the first thing you do?
Well, the first thing that I would do is I want to do some investigations of some very serious issues that have happened in the city of Cincinnati. Most recent one is the fact that we had this terrible fire on the I-471 bridge. And my understanding is that the source of the fire, not the people who started it, but the material that was put on fire had been there for close to a decade, and it's city-owned property, and it was the Thousand Hands Park that was made out of not only wood, but also things like neoprene and other petroleum-based products in the foam that once it was ignited turned into a blazing inferno. And I want to understand how could that have been not discovered or addressed by the current administration and previous administrations, because that's a very serious issue to have a flammable material like that under a bridge. And I requested City Council explore that. I sent them an email and I got response from no one on City Council. So I want to understand that. I also have talked to some business owners who've been seriously impacted by that. Their business was disrupted. They've lost a tremendous amount of sales, and they've had a loss of customer support. And I want to understand why the city hasn't done anything to address those companies and provide some redress for the damages that they suffered.
I did look at your posts both on your Facebook page and on the Republican page that when you announced you were running. Some of the other issues that you brought up are you'd like to possibly create tourism with an aerial trolley between Mount Adams and the casino, correct? That's one thing you'd like to do.
Yes, I'm calling it an aerial incline to bring back the reminiscence of the inclines that we did have on, I think there were 5 active inclines in our area. There is an incline that still operates in our country. It's in the city of Pittsburgh. It's very popular. It's a very important part of their visit experience in the city of Pittsburgh. I think we should be able to replicate that here. I would start with Mount Adams. And this is not my idea. This is not my original idea. I don't want to claim that. This is something that the Walt Disney Company first brought to Cincinnati in the 1970s. They were working with Town Properties, Mr. Neil Bortz. He and the Disney Company were exploring creating an adult entertainment center in a combination between Mount Adams and the urban core. And it was unable to be developed as initially planned because they couldn't find the 20 acres that they needed to develop into a park. So my idea is there's been some recent developments that might make it possible for us to connect Mount Adams to the casino and go over Interstate 71, which had been a barrier in the past. And that was because I reached out to Senator Bernie Moreno's office, and talked to him about this barrier of crossing an interstate. And he told me, or his staff told me, that they would be able to address that concern, and that he has a very strong interest in bringing more of this transit capability using aerial trams, because in his home country where he was born in Colombia, they have these trams that are mass transit movers. There's one in Medellin, that is used as a transportation method to move hundreds, if not thousands, of people a day from the hillsides down to their basin. And I want to see if we can't reapply some of this technology in the United States. I will also say that the Medellin design is also being reapplied today in Paris, France. They are building one of these mass transit systems between the city center of Paris out to the southeast outskirts of their town. And it's much cheaper and much more quickly to develop than it is to try to build something on the ground. So I think this is a technology that the United States needs to reapply. We are going to be benchmarking with Telluride, which has an active gondola right now. One of the initial design features that we will have will be very similar to that, which is in practice right now in Telluride.
What do you feel are the biggest issues facing the city, and how would you address them?
Well, I think that the city right now has got a very serious issue with youth crime. I think that many of our young people have had years of trauma in their life caused by active gunfire, violence, family breakups, and just a lot of issues in our urban core, that many of these young people are now growing up and they're reacting to all this trauma. And I want to find some way to see if we can't do a private-public partnership to where I reach out and connect with major donors and corporations to see if I could raise up to $50 million to help provide PTSD trauma relief for young people and get them off this path of violence and picking up weapons and taking violence to respond to issues in their day, and learn how to deal with this trauma in a productive manner so that they can become more stable and active members of our society. I think there's a tremendous issue there that needs to be addressed. So that would be one of the key things I would address. I also feel like we need to focus on basic city services, such as we need to keep our streets and well maintained. We need to fill potholes. We need to make sure that we've got a plan to keep the snow off our streets when it happens. I think it was an embarrassment to the city that we were unable to plow many of our streets. I know personally, the street that goes in front of my house, they put a barricade down at the entrance to the street and the exit to the street. And instead of plowing the street or putting down any sort of beet juice as, a preventive application to prevent the ice from forming, they just decided in advance when the snow came that they were just going to barricade the street. That led to ABC World News Tonight with David Muir sending Victor Oquendo to Cincinnati, where he filmed downtown in the morning. And then in the afternoon, he parked himself in front of my house and broadcast live from just in front of my house, showing these barricades and all the snow that had been left on the ground. So it was an embarrassment. I walked out there and I spoke to Victor after he had finished his broadcast, and he told me off camera that this was a major national story, that the city of Cincinnati was unable to deal with just a large, but not a unusually large snowfall. And it just was something that needed to be brought to the attention of the public.
Okay. So how do you make those changes? I know you talked about in the youth crime issue, you were going to reach out to private donors, but how do you fix the situation with the streets, both in terms of the conditions of the streets and then clearing the roads? What would you do differently?
Well, it needs to be a priority. I don't think the city manager is putting enough focus on that. And also, they are putting all of these obstacles in our street. They call them speed humps. And they never looked at what would be the implication of a plow trying to drive over one of those speed humps when all that snow is on the ground. Many of these drivers can't even see where the speed hump actually is, and then they hit it, and it damages the plow. And I believe that there's been damage to the amount of about 20% of the fleet that was taken out when they sent the fleet out, and they started hitting these speed humps and damaging the plows. So, we need to understand, is that really a realistic method to calm our streets having speed humps if we can't plow our streets? There has to be some real analysis done without just leaving it up to chance to figure out, can we continue to plow our streets or not? I personally also feel like those speed humps are not calming our city streets. I hear that the city has some data that says that does calm them. But when I drive down Coleraine Avenue, and I do that quite a bit because I like to shop up in that area, I find constantly that people are still greatly exceeding the speed limit of 35 miles per hour. I see signs that are up that say you are speeding or you are traveling at this speed, and I can see what other cars are doing. And I easily see many people traveling at 55 miles an hour up those streets, even though there's speed humps there. I also feel like a lot of people with vehicles that might have low ride or rims on their car that aren't that wide, narrow tires, that they could be damaging these vehicles. They could also have mufflers and things like that are jammed loose going over these speed humps. And I don't think we've really understood what's the implication to working people who might have a vehicle that's not able to be used because it's been damaged by one of these speed humps. And when people have told me they've tried to get compensation from the city, it's like an endless loop of not getting any response from them when they say my car was damaged because of your speed hump, and they don't get any recourse from the city. So I think that needs to really be addressed for our working people to be able to get to their jobs.
One quick question. You brought up, kind of where you drive. What neighborhood do you live in?
I live in Mount Adams.
Okay. Secondly, you brought up the city manager. You've made some previous statements, and it's still actually listed on your Facebook page that you considered her a DEI hire. From what I understand, you've apologized for that, but you still want to get rid of her. You want to expound on that a little bit?
Yes, I don't believe that she is qualified or capable to be an effective city manager. I could give you numerous examples. I've already talked about the fact that we had this fire underneath the I-471 bridge. That's her responsibility to ensure that we don't have fire hazards that exist like that. And that's never been addressed. And I've never seen any sort of root cause analysis as to whether or not that's the only situation. She should be out there proactively now addressing all of our bridges to make sure that they're safe. And I haven't seen anything indicating that she's taken that seriously. The other thing is she fired the chief of fire without any cause. And it's now been ruled by the judge, a federal judge, that this can go to court. And we're going to hear testimony as to why she fired the fire chief without cause. And my understanding is that she was told to fire the fire chief because the mayor was upset about the fact that Chief Washington was very concerned about bringing in new recruits to the fire department that had been previous experience in other village or nearby township firefighters, and that they had been trained using different principles and practices than what the city of Cincinnati does. And so when these people would come to work and they would say, well, that's not the way we do it in so-and-so township, that just creates morale issues and it creates confusion. And when you have a fire happen, you've got to rely on your basic training. And these people need to know what is the method that should be used in every sort of a emergency situation. And they shouldn't be thinking, well, this is the way I did it at this previous job I had, and this is not what we're doing here in Cincinnati. And it can lead to confusion and errors. And the last thing we want to have is in an emergency situation that we have, a person not doing the work in the proper manner. And so I feel like the Chief Washington situation was very poorly handled. He was forced out of his job, having done nothing wrong other than wanting to adhere to some very solid principles about training. And it does cost more money to train people from the entry level, but he had a very sound principle behind that, and he was forced out of office. And I think that wasn't her fault. She should have stood up for that fire chief. And There's other things as well. The fact that she left her key fob in her vehicle, had it parked in front of her house. The vehicle was stolen along with the passport that she has, as well as her laptop and the keys to City Hall. And they found that vehicle. It was at a Kroger store up in Winton Hills. And the police officer came to her home, had her body camera on, and said, "We found your vehicle, we found your passport, we found your keys, and we want to make sure that you're prepared to press charges against these two individuals who we've apprehended." And the first thing she said is your body camera on? Turn it off. And the officer responded, "I can't turn it off. That's against the law." And she said, "You work for me and I'm ordering you to turn off your body camera." And so she turned off her body camera. And then while off camera, she said, "I am not pressing charges. I just want my vehicle back. I want my passport. I want my keys. I want my laptop." So to me, that means a cover up. And so I want to investigate why she did something like that.
Okay. I want to go back to you. Do you still feel like you said she's unqualified?
Yes.
Do you feel like, I know you said, and you kind of rescinded what you said, do you still feel like she was hired because she's African American and that was a major reason for it?
Oh, no.
Okay.
She was hired for that role because the mayor wanted to violate the city charter. He wanted to have a person serving in the role of city manager who would be completely dependent on him and his support so that she could earn a $280,000 salary a year when she's probably only qualified for a salary of $60,000. So he's holding over her head this huge salary boost that she got, but she has to do everything that he tells her to do. And so our city charter says that the city manager should be acting as the CEO of the city of Cincinnati. And that's not the case. Right now, the CEO of the city of Cincinnati is Mayor Aftab Pureval. He is holding it over this individual who's not qualified to do the job because she wants to make that salary. And the only way she can keep her job is by doing his bidding.
More recent news, what was your take on the whole controversy over the Hyde Park development? And if you're elected, would you work to rescind that and stop it?
I think that's a huge scandal. There is no reason to use planned development on that development that is going forward at Hyde Park Square. I think most of the business community, most of the civic association there are in favor of redeveloping the square, but doing it using existing codes. And the code right now does not allow for a hotel to be in that site, and it also does not allow for the height that the planned development would allow. I think if we could go back to the existing zoning laws, the connected community zoning, that the civic association and the business community would support the development, but they would have to reduce the height and they would have to remove the presence of a boutique hotel.
Switching gears just a little bit, you technically, I think the race is the primary is nonpartisan, but you're obviously a registered Republican in a very Democratic city. How do you win, or how do you get enough votes to finish second to be able to run in the general? And then in the general, strategically and tactically, how do you win? How do you convince a lot of Democrats to vote for a Republican?
Well, I think they need to understand that the mayor, even though he's labeled as a Democrat, is more of a socialist, and he's not in the best interests of our city. They will understand that the policies that he's proposing, especially his Green Deal, is going to be very dangerous to a lot of homeowners. We're going to find that mass developments are going to be put in place that aren't going to require you to have off-street parking. And it's going to be disastrous for a lot of homeowners in communities, not only Hyde Park, Mount Adams, Oakley, but a number of other communities where once they find out what the plan is and what this mayor is all about, it's a socialist agenda, not a Democratic agenda.
The mayor has also kind of walked a fine line when it comes to working with the Trump administration on a couple of things. first of all, DEI programs, and then cooperating with ICE in terms of possible deportations and immigration arrests. What do you think the city should be doing in terms of either cooperating with ICE or just being on call to do what they're legally required to do, which is what the current policy is? Or do you go further like the sheriff in Butler County, who is being much more aggressive, opening the jail, helping out with arrests, things like that? And then the second question is, how do you feel about the city's current, diversity programs, and should that be changed given what's coming out of Washington?
Yes, I don't think that we should try to antagonize the federal government and label ourselves as a sanctuary city. I think that we can provide whatever we're legally required to provide in terms of access to our jails or things like that. That ICE legally has the right to go in and see these things, but I don't think that we should be partnering with them on trying to, do any sort of police activity focused on, that situation. I think that's up to ICE to do that, and it's not a part of our core mission. And I would not want to encourage our police department to be partnering with ICE on doing anything. Leave it up to ICE to do it, but not get in their way and not try to antagonize the federal government, because, we are very dependent on both state and federal funding. And the last thing we want to do is have funding cut back and impact our African-American and Appalachian communities that are underserved already. We need to have that federal funding. So my primary concern is making sure that we get our fair share, if not more, if possible, of federal funding. So, that's the way I would approach that, is let ICE do their work, but not blatantly go and say, well, we're a sanctuary city.
So would you try to get council to rescind the proclamation they made back in 2017 that we
Yes.
kind of are? Okay.
I think we should do that.
What about the whole DEI controversy? Obviously, the Trump administration is trying to eradicate programs, and there are some in the Cincinnati government. Would you be interested or willing to investigate getting rid of those?
No, I don't. Unless we are forced to do something like that, I would not want to impact our diversity programs, especially in the area of supplier diversity. I think that we are not doing really enough effort to use our local suppliers, our local minority and women-owned suppliers. I think that we need to put more emphasis on supporting our local minority and women-owned businesses. And as long as that remains legal, I think that we should be doing more in that area.
Wrapping it up, if you were just to make a pitch to the voters, why should voters vote for you for mayor?
Well, I am going to adhere to the city charter. If I am elected mayor, I am going to hire a qualified city manager who will be fully empowered to do their role and do it professionally. I am not going to try to oversee or control that city manager. I will meet with the city manager, and I will encourage the city manager to consider ideas that I'm hearing from the public and share whatever people bring to me with the city manager. But I'm not going to use a sledgehammer with a city manager and say, do at my bidding, or I'm going to fire you. And that's exactly what's happening today. And so we have an illegal system in place we're violating our city charter. The mayor needs to step back and not try to play CEO of the city. That's not the role of the city mayor. He or she should be a community activist who is there to hear and listen to the voice of the people, to give voice to those people at city council meetings, to share what insights he or she hears from the people of Cincinnati, and to advocate for principles of good governance. I can do that effectively given my experience.
Any last thoughts? Anything I didn't ask that you wanted to add?
No, I appreciate this opportunity.